The letter arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in late September of 1882, and Theresa Hartley knew before she opened it that her marriage was over. She stood in the doorway of the small frame house on the edge of Platteville, Colorado, holding the envelope with trembling fingers. The paper felt thin and cheap, just like the promises her husband had made 5 years ago when they had stood before the preacher in Kansas City. Thomas had left 3 months earlier, claiming he needed to find work in the silver mines near Leadville. The money he sent back had dwindled with each passing week until it stopped altogether. Now this letter, postmarked from Denver, felt heavy with finality despite weighing almost nothing at all. Theresa broke the seal and unfolded the single page. Thomas's handwriting was rushed, careless, much like everything else about him in recent years. The words blurred before her eyes as she read them once, then twice, unable to fully process what he was saying. He had met someone else, a widow with 3 children who had proven her fertility. He needed sons to carry on his name, and Theresa had failed to give him even 1 child in 5 years of marriage. The divorce papers would be filed in Denver. He was not coming back. The letter slipped from her fingers and fluttered to the wooden porch. Theresa sank down onto the steps, her legs no longer able to support her. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the flat Colorado plains, but she felt cold all the way through to her bones. Barren. That was the word the doctor in town had used last year, spoken with clinical detachment as if he were discussing a field that refused to yield crops. Thomas had grown distant after that appointment, his eyes sliding away from hers across the dinner table, his side of the bed growing farther and farther away, even though the mattress stayed the same size. She had tried everything. Herbs from the medicine woman who lived in a soddy outside of town. Prayers every night on her knees until they ached. She had even considered that perhaps it was Thomas who could not father children, but he refused to entertain the possibility. In his mind, the fault lay entirely with her, and now he had left her to prove it with some other woman. Theresa did not cry. She had used up all her tears in the lonely months of his absence, lying awake at night wondering if this was all her life would ever be. At 24 years old, she was alone in a town where she knew few people, in a house she could not afford to keep, with a reputation that would now be stained by abandonment and barrenness both. No decent man would want her. No family would welcome her. She had no children to give her purpose, no husband to give her standing in the community. The sun crept lower in the sky, painting the prairie grasses gold and orange. Theresa finally stood, her body moving automatically even as her mind remained numb. She picked up the letter, folded it carefully, and placed it in her apron pocket. Then she went inside to begin the practical work of dismantling her life. The house was small, just 3 rooms, but Thomas had rented it furnished. Almost nothing here belonged to her. Her clothes, a few books, her mother's wedding china that had survived the journey west in a barrel packed with straw. Her sewing basket with the embroidered cover she had made as a girl. A daguerreotype of her parents, both dead now from fever. She could fit her entire life into a single trunk with room to spare. She worked through the evening, folding and packing by lamplight. When she finally crawled into bed near midnight, she lay staring at the ceiling, making calculations. She had $17 saved from the household money, hidden in a coffee tin under the floorboards. The rent was paid through the end of the month, giving her 2 weeks to find work and a place to stay. She could sew, cook, clean, keep books. Surely someone in Platteville needed help. But the next morning, when she walked down Main Street with her head held high, she felt the stairs like pinpricks against her skin. News traveled fast in a town of fewer than 300 souls. The postmaster's wife whispered to the shopkeeper's daughter. The banker's clerk smirked as she passed. By noon, everyone knew that Thomas Hartley had left his barren wife for a real woman, and Theresa felt the weight of their judgment like a stone around her neck. She tried the hotel first. The owner, a portly man named Mr. Simmons, looked her up and down with an expression that made her skin crawl. He said he had no need for help, but perhaps they could work out some other arrangement. Theresa left quickly, her cheeks burning. The restaurant owner's wife turned her away at the door, saying they only hired girls of good character. The general store, the millinery, the laundry, all had the same answer. No work for a woman like her. By the fourth day, Theresa's savings had dwindled to $14 after buying food. She sat in the empty house, staring at her remaining supplies, and considered her options. She could try another town, but that would require money for train fare and no guarantee of better prospects. She could write to her aunt in Ohio, but the woman had made it clear years ago that she considered Theresa's westward journey a mistake and would offer no help. She could accept Mr. Simmons's leering offer, but the thought made her stomach turn. On the fifth day, she was sitting on her porch in the late afternoon, mending a torn petticoat because she could not afford to replace it, when a wagon rolled down the dusty street and stopped in front of her house. The wagon was loaded with supplies, flour sacks and crates of goods, and it was pulled by two sturdy draft horses. But what caught her attention was the man driving it and the 6 children packed into the back. The man climbed down from the seat with the easy grace of someone accustomed to physical labor. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and sun-bronzed skin. His dark hair needed cutting, curling slightly over his collar, and several days' worth of beard shadowed his jaw. But his eyes were kind, a warm brown that crinkled at the corners as if he smiled often. He looked to be in his early 30s, wearing work-worn clothes and dusty boots. "Madam," he said, removing his hat, "I am looking for Mrs. Theresa Hartley." "I am she," Theresa said, setting down her sewing. Her heart pounded with sudden anxiety. Had Thomas sent someone to evict her early, to collect some debt she did not know about? "My name is Kellan Norwood," the man said. "I have a ranch about 8 miles north of town. I heard you might be looking for work." Theresa glanced past him at the children in the wagon. They ranged in age from perhaps 4 to around 12, and they were watching her with curious, somewhat wary eyes. They all had the same dark hair as the man, and she could see the family resemblance in their features. "What kind of work?" she asked carefully. Kellan Norwood shifted his weight, looking suddenly uncomfortable. "I need help at the ranch. Someone to cook, clean, help with the children. My wife died 8 months ago, and I have been managing on my own, but it is too much. The children need proper care, proper meals. The house is falling apart around us. I can offer room and board plus $30 a month." $30. It was more than generous for household help. Theresa studied the man's face, looking for signs of impropriety or dishonesty, but saw only honest exhaustion and perhaps a touch of desperation. "Why come to me?" she asked. "Surely there are other women in town who would take such a position." Kellan met her eyes directly. "Because they all have husbands or families of their own. And because I heard your husband left you, and I figured you might need a fresh start as much as we need help." His bluntness should have offended her, but instead, Theresa felt a strange relief. No pretense, no dancing around the truth. Just honest need meeting honest necessity. "Your children," she said slowly, "they would need to accept having a stranger in their home." "They need a woman's touch," Kellan said firmly. "Their mother was the best person I ever knew, and nothing will replace her." but they need someone who can braid hair and patch knees and make sure they eat vegetables. I am doing my best, but my best is not enough." One of the children in the wagon, a girl of about 8 with braids coming loose and a dirt smudge on her cheek, called out, "Papa said you are a good cook." "Are you a good cook?" Theresa felt the corners of her mouth twitch upward for the first time in days. "I am a decent cook. What is your favorite food?" "Apple pie," the girl said immediately. "Then I suppose I would have to make you one," Theresa replied. Kellan's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Does that mean you will consider it?" Theresa looked at the house behind her, empty and cold. She thought of Thomas's letter in her trunk, of the whispers following her through town, of the dwindling coins in her coffee tin. Then she looked at the wagon full of children with their rumpled clothes and hopeful faces, and at the man who clearly loved them enough to swallow his pride and ask a stranger for help. "When would you need me to start?" she asked. "Today, if you are willing," Kellan said. "We can load your things and head back before dark." It took less than an hour to pack her trunk and the barrel with her mother's china. Kellan and the 2 oldest boys, who introduced themselves as Kenneth and Kyle, carried everything to the wagon with efficient strength. The children rearranged themselves to make room, and Kellan helped Theresa up onto the seat beside him. As they rolled out of Platteville, Theresa did not look back. There was nothing behind her worth seeing. The ride to the Norwood ranch took nearly an hour, following a rutted track that wound through prairie grasslands. Kellan drove in comfortable silence while the children chattered in the back, their initial shyness wearing off quickly. The 8-year-old who liked apple pie was named Catherine, and she seemed to have appointed herself as spokesperson for the group. She pointed out landmarks along the way, a rock formation that supposedly looked like a buffalo, a creek where they caught frogs in the summer, the place where Kenneth had fallen off his horse and broken his arm last year. The other children were Kyle, who at 12 was serious and quiet, helping to keep the younger ones in line. Kenneth was 10, gangly and talkative, full of energy. After Catherine came 9-year-old Kevin, then 6-year-old Katie, and finally 4-year-old Christopher, who everyone called Kit. He had fallen asleep against Catherine's shoulder, his thumb in his mouth. The ranch appeared on the horizon as the sun began its descent toward the mountains in the west. It was more substantial than Theresa had expected, a large 2-story house built of timber and stone, with a wide porch wrapping around the front. There was a barn, a stable, a chicken coop, and several other outbuildings. Cattle grazed in fenced pastures, and she could see a vegetable garden that had clearly been neglected but still showed signs of past care. "It is a lot of space," Kellan said, almost apologetically, as he helped her down from the wagon. "My wife Sarah and I built this place together over 10 years. We were going to fill it with children and grandchildren someday." The pain in his voice was fresh despite 8 months having passed. Theresa felt an unexpected kinship with this grieving widower. They had both lost their futures, just in different ways. The inside of the house confirmed what Kellan had said about things falling apart. The main room was large and comfortable, with a stone fireplace and sturdy furniture, but dust covered every surface. Dishes were piled in the kitchen, some still crusted with old food. Laundry overflowed from baskets. The floor needed sweeping, the windows needed washing, and the whole place had the musty smell of a house that was lived in but not properly cared for. The children scattered to their rooms, and Kellan showed Theresa to a bedroom on the first floor, just off the kitchen. It was small but clean, with a bed, a dresser, and a window looking out over the garden. "This was the hired man's room when we had one," Kellan explained. "He left after Sarah died to find work elsewhere. I have been managing the ranch mostly on my own since then, with the boys helping where they can." "Where do you sleep?" Theresa asked, then immediately wished she had not. It was too personal a question, but Kellan did not seem bothered. Upstairs at the end of the hall. The children are all upstairs too. You will have privacy down here. He left her to unpack, and Theresa stood in the middle of the small room, feeling suddenly overwhelmed. She had gone from a wife with a home to a hired housekeeper in less than a week. Everything had changed so quickly that she had not had time to process any of it. But there was no time for processing now. Through the doorway, she could see the kitchen disaster, and she could hear children's voices arguing about something upstairs. Theresa rolled up her sleeves and went to work. By the time Kellan came in from checking on the animals an hour later, she had cleared and washed all the dishes, wiped down every surface in the kitchen, and had beef stew simmering on the stove using supplies she found in the pantry. The children had been sent to wash their hands and faces, and she was slicing bread from a loaf that was only slightly stale. Kellan stopped in the doorway, staring. "You did all this already." "It needed doing," Theresa said simply. "Supper will be ready in 20 minutes. Are there any food preferences I should know about? Anyone who will not eat certain things?" "Kit does not like onions," Kellan said, still looking dazed. "And Kevin will try to say he does not like any vegetables, but he is lying. Make him eat them anyway." Theresa smiled. "I had a brother like that once. He grew out of it." Supper was a chaotic affair. The children crowded around the large kitchen table, jostling for position, talking over each other, spilling milk, and generally creating the kind of controlled havoc that came with 6 young people in one place. Kellan sat at the head of the table, quietly making sure everyone had enough to eat, settling disputes about who got the bigger piece of bread, reminding them to use napkins. Theresa sat at the other end, watching the dynamics, learning the personalities. Kyle was the responsible one, cutting up Kit's meat without being asked. Kenneth was the clown, making his younger siblings laugh with silly faces. Catherine was the nurturer, wiping Katie's chin and making sure Kevin drank his milk. Kevin himself was indeed trying to hide his carrots under his bread, and Katie was singing softly to herself between bites. Kit was slowly falling asleep in his chair, his head nodding forward. "This is the best meal we have had in months," Kyle said quietly, and something about his serious tone made Theresa's throat tighten. "Your father has been doing his best," she said gently. "Papa cannot cook," Catherine announced cheerfully. "He burns everything." Kellan did not deny it. "It is true. I can work cattle, mend fences, break horses, and build a barn, but I cannot make an edible biscuit to save my life." After supper, Theresa supervised the children's bedtime routines, which were apparently usually much more haphazard. She made sure everyone washed properly, checked that teeth were brushed, found clean nightclothes for those who needed them, and tucked the younger ones into bed. Catherine's room was shared with Katie, and it was a disaster of scattered clothes and forgotten toys. The boys' rooms were even worse. "Tomorrow we are going to organize these rooms," Theresa told Catherine, who looked more excited than dismayed by the prospect. When she finally came back downstairs near 9 o'clock, she found Kellan sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, staring at nothing in particular. He looked up when she entered, and she saw the exhaustion etched into every line of his face. "They are all asleep?" he asked. Kit was already asleep before his head hit the pillow. "The others should be out soon." "Thank you," Kellan said quietly, "for all of this. I know it is your job, but still, thank you." Theresa poured herself a cup of coffee and sat down across from him. The kitchen was clean now, dishes washed and put away, floor swept, the stove banked for the night. Outside, darkness had fallen completely, and she could hear crickets chirping. "How did your wife die?" she asked, then added, You do not have to tell me if you do not want to. I am just trying to understand the situation. Kellan was quiet for a long moment, his hands wrapped around his coffee cup. Pneumonia. It came on fast last January. One day she was fine, laughing and making plans for spring. 3 days later she could not breathe. A week after that she was gone. I am sorry, Theresa said inadequately. She was everything, Kellan continued, his voice rough. My wife, my partner, my best friend. We built this place from nothing. She could ride as well as any man, shoot straighter than most, and she never complained about the hard work. But she was also gentle with the children, patient, kind. I do not know how to be both the strong one and the soft one. I do not know how to be what they need. Theresa thought of Thomas, who had left at the first sign of difficulty, who had blamed her for something beyond her control, who had never been a true partner. She looked at this man who was trying so hard to be everything for his children, who was man enough to admit he needed help, and she felt something shift inside her chest. You do not have to be everything, she said. That is why I am here. Kellan met her eyes, and in the lamplight, she saw gratitude and something else, something that might have been relief or hope or just the simple comfort of not being alone anymore. Over the next 2 weeks, Theresa settled into a routine at the Norwood ranch. She woke before dawn to start the stove and make breakfast. The children came down one by one, sleep, rumpled and hungry, and she made sure they ate properly before they started their morning chores. The older boys helped Kellan with the ranch work, while Catherine and Kevin fed the chickens and collected eggs. Katie helped Theresa in the kitchen, learning to knead bread dough with her small hands. Kit followed whoever would let him, chattering constantly in the way of 4-year-olds. The house slowly came back to life under her care. She scrubbed floors until they shone, washed windows until they sparkled, beat the dust from curtains and rugs. She organized the children's rooms, mended their clothes, and made sure everyone had clean socks. She weeded the neglected garden and was pleased to find it still producing late-season vegetables. She canned tomatoes and beans, pickled cucumbers, and made preserves from wild plums the children helped her gather. In the evenings, after supper was cleared and the children were in bed, she and Kellan would sit at the kitchen table and talk. He told her about the ranch, about his plans to expand the herd next spring, about the challenges of raising cattle in Colorado's unpredictable climate. She told him about growing up in Ohio, about her parents who had died when she was 18, about her journey west with Thomas and the gradual dissolution of their marriage. "Did you love him?" Kellan asked one night. Theresa considered the question honestly. "I thought I did. But I think I was more in love with the idea of marriage, of having a family, of building a life together. Thomas was handsome and charming, and he said all the right things. But when things got difficult, when I could not give him what he wanted, he left. That is not love. I see that now. Sarah used to say that real love is what is left after the romance burns away," Kellan said softly. "The everyday choosing to be together, even when it is hard, especially when it is hard." "You miss her very much," Theresa said. "It was not a question. Every day. But it is getting easier to breathe, especially now that the children are happier. Catherine has not cried herself to sleep in over a week. That is the longest stretch since Sarah died." Theresa felt her heart clench. She had heard Catherine crying once in the night during her first week at the ranch. She had gone upstairs and sat on the edge of the girl's bed, stroking her hair and singing softly until she fell back asleep. Catherine had not mentioned it the next morning, but she had held Theresa's hand while they worked in the garden. The children were slowly warming to her. Kyle's initial wariness had faded into quiet respect. Kenneth made her laugh with his constant jokes and boundless energy. Catherine had started calling her Miss Theresa, and Katie followed her around like a small, devoted shadow. Kevin was still testing boundaries, but even he was starting to listen when she corrected him. And Kit had announced that she gave the best hugs, which he demonstrated frequently. On a Saturday afternoon in mid-October, Theresa was baking the promised apple pie when Kellan came in from the barn with a troubled expression. "There is a storm coming," he said. "A bad one, according to the clouds. We need to get the cattle into the near pasture and make sure everything is secured." Theresa looked out the window and saw the dark mass building on the western horizon. The air had that strange quality that came before big weather, heavy and electric. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. "Keep the children inside. Make sure all the windows are secured and the shutters are closed. If it gets bad, take everyone down to the root cellar." He left before she could respond, calling for Kyle and Kenneth. Theresa quickly organized the remaining children, trying to keep them calm despite the growing wind outside. She closed and latched all the windows, pulled the shutters across, and made sure there were lamps and blankets in the root cellar just in case. The storm hit near sunset with a fury that made the house shake. Thunder crashed so loud it hurt, and lightning turned the world white every few seconds. Rain lashed against the walls in sheets, and the wind howled like a living thing. Katie started crying and Kit buried his face in Theresa's skirt. "It is all right," Theresa said, trying to project calm she did not entirely feel. "Your papa knows what he is doing. We are safe inside." Catherine stood at the window, peering through a crack in the shutters. "I can see them coming back, Papa and the boys. They are running." Moments later, the door burst open and Kellan stumbled in with Kyle and Kenneth behind him. They were soaked through, water streaming from their hats and coats. Kellan's face was grim. "There is a section of fence down on the north side. Some of the cattle got out. I need to go after them before they scatter too far." "Not in this," Theresa said firmly. "You will get struck by lightning or break your horse's leg in the dark." "Those cattle are worth 3 months of income," Kellan argued. "I cannot afford to lose them." "And these children cannot afford to lose their father," Theresa shot back. "The cattle will still be there in the morning." They stared at each other for a long moment, and Theresa saw him struggling with the decision. Finally, he nodded, his shoulders sagging. "You are right. Morning will have to do." Theresa got them all out of their wet clothes and into dry ones, made hot coffee for Kellan and the older boys, and warmed milk for the younger children. The storm raged outside for another 2 hours, but inside the house, they were dry and safe and together. That night after the storm had passed and the children were asleep, Kellan found Theresa on the porch. The air smelled clean and fresh, washed by the rain, and stars were starting to appear between the breaking clouds. "Thank you for stopping me," he said quietly. "I was not thinking clearly. Sarah used to do that too, pull me back when I was being reckless." "The children need you," Theresa said. "That is more important than cattle." Kellan leaned against the porch railing, looking out over his land. "When Sarah died, I thought I could just keep working, keep moving forward, and eventually the pain would fade. But you cannot outrun grief. It is always there, waiting for you to slow down." Theresa moved to stand beside him. "No, you cannot outrun it, but you can learn to live with it. You can build a life that has room for both the grief and the joy." He turned to look at her, and in the moonlight his eyes were soft. "You are a wise woman, Theresa Hartley." "I am a woman who has had to learn some hard lessons," she corrected. "That is not quite the same thing." In the morning, Kellan and the boys went out to survey the damage. The downed fence would need repair, but they managed to round up most of the scattered cattle by midday. Only 3 were missing, which Kellan said was better than he had feared. Life continued in its rhythm. October faded into November, and the days grew shorter and colder. Theresa made sure everyone had warm clothes for winter, letting out hems and taking in seams as needed. She taught Catherine how to make stew and Katie how to darn socks. She helped Kevin with his reading, which he struggled with, and played counting games with Kit in the evenings while Theresa sewed or knitted by the fire. Kellan would read aloud from books or newspapers. Sometimes Kenneth would play the harmonica that had been his mother's, and Catherine would sing. Kyle would whittle small animals from scraps of wood, giving them to his younger siblings. These were peaceful times, domestic times, and Theresa found herself feeling something she had not felt in years: contentment. But she was also increasingly aware of Kellan himself. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled at his children. The gentleness in his big, work-roughened hands when he helped Kit with his buttons. The sound of his laugh, rare but genuine. The width of his shoulders when he carried in firewood. She tried to tamp down these feelings, reminding herself that she was hired help, that he was still grieving his wife, that she was a woman whose own husband had found her lacking. Then came the day in late November when Kellan had to make a trip to Denver to sell cattle and purchase supplies for winter. It would take 4 days, possibly 5 if the weather was bad. He was clearly torn about leaving. "We will be fine," Theresa assured him. "I have managed households before. We will keep up with the chores and the animals. Kyle is capable of handling anything that comes up. If there is any trouble, send Kyle to the Morrison place. They are about 5 miles east. Good people. They will help if you need it." The first 2 days went smoothly. Theresa and the children fell into a slightly different routine without Kellan there, but everyone did their parts. On the 3rd evening, however, Katie developed a fever. By midnight she was burning up, her small body shaking with chills, her breath coming in labored gasps. Theresa had seen this before. Pneumonia. The same thing that had killed Kellan's wife. "Kyle," she said quietly, trying not to panic, "I need you to ride to the Morrison place and ask them to fetch Dr. Williams from town. Tell him it is urgent." Kyle's face went white. He understood what pneumonia meant. But he nodded and was dressed and out the door within minutes. Theresa spent the rest of the night at Katie's bedside, sponging her hot skin with cool water, propping her up to help her breathe, spooning small amounts of liquid between her cracked lips. Catherine sat in the corner, silent tears running down her face. Kenneth kept the fire going and heated water. Kevin watched Kit, keeping him distracted and away from the sick room. The doctor arrived near dawn, a gruff older man with tired eyes. He examined Katie thoroughly, then looked at Theresa with an expression that made her stomach drop. "It is pneumonia, as you suspected. She is very sick. The next 48 hours will tell us if she is strong enough to fight it off." "What can I do?" Theresa asked. "Exactly what you have been doing. Keep her cool, keep her hydrated, keep her propped up so her lungs can drain, and pray if you are the praying sort." He left medicine and instructions, then departed to tend to other patients. Theresa sent Kyle to intercept Kellan on his way back, knowing he would want to be there. Then she settled in for the longest 2 days of her life. Katie drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes calling for her mother, sometimes crying that she could not breathe. Theresa held her, rocked her, sang to her, and begged her to keep fighting. The other children tiptoed around the house, scared and subdued. Catherine brought meals that no one really ate. Kenneth sat outside Katie's door like a small guard dog. Kyle did the ranch chores with a grim determination. Kevin clung to Kit, both of them too young to fully understand but old enough to be terrified. Kellan arrived on the evening of the 2nd day, his horse lathered from hard riding. He took the stairs 3 at a time and burst into Katie's room, his face desperate. "How is she?" he demanded. "Fighting," Theresa said quietly. The fever broke an hour ago. Dr. Williams said if it stays down through the night, she should recover. Kellan sagged against the doorframe, his eyes closing briefly. Then he moved to the bed where his daughter lay sleeping, her breathing easier now, her cheeks less flushed. He touched her forehead with a shaking hand. "When Kyle told me, I thought I was going to lose another one," he said roughly. "I rode through the night to get here." "She is going to be all right," Theresa said, and she believed it. Katie's color was better, her breathing steadier. The crisis had passed. Kellan turned to look at Theresa, really look at her. She knew she must look a sight, exhausted and rumpled, wearing the same dress for 3 days, her hair escaping its pins. "You saved her life," he said. "I did what needed to be done. Any mother would have." "You are not her mother," Kellan said, but there was no accusation in his tone. "Just observation." "No," Theresa agreed, "but I love her anyway. I love all of them." The words hung in the air between them, and Theresa realized they were true. Sometime in the past 2 months, these 6 children had wound themselves around her heart. Catherine with her helpful nature and ready smile, Kenneth with his energy and jokes, Kyle with his quiet strength, Kevin with his stubbornness that hit a soft heart, Katie with her sweetness, and Kit with his endless affection and trust. She loved them, all of them. They were not hers by blood, but they had become hers by choice. Kellan's expression shifted into something Theresa could not quite read. "They love you too. Catherine told me last week that you were the answer to her prayers. She asked God to send someone to take care of us, and he sent you." Theresa felt tears prick her eyes. "I am not sure God had much to do with it. You drove to town and offered me a job." "Maybe God works through people," Kellan said softly. "Maybe he knew we needed you as much as you needed us." Over the next week, Katie recovered fully. Her appetite returned, her energy came back, and soon she was laughing and playing with her siblings as if she had never been sick. But something had shifted in the household. The children's affection for Theresa became more open, more natural. They called her Miss Theresa without hesitation. They brought her their small triumphs and troubles. They sought her out for comfort and guidance. And Theresa's relationship with Kellan changed too. He watched her with the children, and she sometimes caught an expression on his face that made her heart skip. He started finding excuses to be in the kitchen when she was cooking. He asked her opinion on ranch decisions. He told her stories about his past, about growing up in Missouri, about meeting Sarah at a barn dance, about their journey west together. One evening in early December, after the children were in bed, they sat by the fire in the main room. Theresa was knitting socks for Kit, whose feet seemed to grow overnight. Kellan was supposedly reading a newspaper, but she noticed he kept looking at her over the top of it. "Is something wrong?" she finally asked. Kellan set down the paper. "Theresa, I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly." Her heart started to pound. "All right. Are you happy here? Is this the kind of life you want? Because if not, if you are just staying out of necessity or obligation, I need to know. I do not want you to feel trapped." Theresa set down her knitting. "Why are you asking me this?" "Because I am aware that you came here because you had no other choice. Your husband left you, the town turned against you, and I offered you a way out. But 2 months have passed. You have proven yourself more than capable. You could get a position anywhere now with a good reference from me. If you want to leave to find something better, I will understand. The children will understand eventually." "Do you want me to leave?" Theresa asked quietly. "No," Kellan said immediately. "God, no, but this is not about what I want. It is about what is fair to you." Theresa stood and moved to the window, looking out at the dark prairie. Snow was falling softly, coating everything in white. "When Thomas left me, I thought my life was over. I thought I had nothing left, that I was nothing without a husband and children. I felt worthless." She turned back to face Kellan. But here, with you and the children, I have found something I never had before: purpose, belonging. A family that actually wants me, not for what I can do for them, but for who I am. I am happier here than I have ever been in my life. So no, I do not want to leave. This is exactly the life I want." Kellan stood, crossing the room to stand in front of her. He was so tall that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "The children are not the only ones who want you here," he said quietly. "I find myself looking forward to coming inside at the end of the day because I know you will be here. I enjoy our evening conversations more than anything else. When Katie was sick, and you fought so hard to save her, I realized that you have become essential to this family. To me." Theresa's breath caught. "Kellan, I am not sure what you are saying." "I am saying that I have feelings for you," Kellan said bluntly. "Feelings that go beyond employer and employee, beyond gratitude for your help. I care about you, Theresa. I am falling in love with you. And I needed you to know that, even though I am not sure I have any right to tell you. Sarah has only been gone 10 months. Maybe it is too soon. Maybe I am being disrespectful to her memory, but I cannot keep pretending I do not feel this way." Theresa reached up and touched his face, feeling the scratch of his beard against her palm. "Sarah sounds like she was a wonderful woman, and I am sure she loved you and the children more than anything. You think she would want you to be alone forever? Do you think she would want the children to grow up without a mother's love?" "No," Kellan admitted. "She made me promise, right before she died, that I would find someone else eventually, that I would not shut myself off from love. I thought she was delirious from the fever, but she was adamant. She said the children needed a mother, and I needed a partner, and it was all right to move forward." "Then maybe this is what she would have wanted," Theresa said softly. "Maybe this is right." Kellan covered her hand with his. "And what do you feel?" "I have laid my heart out here, but I have no idea what you are thinking." Theresa smiled, and it felt like the first real smile she had given in years. "I am thinking that when I came here, I was broken. I believed the lie that I was not enough, that something was wrong with me. But you and the children have shown me that family is not just about blood. It is about showing up every day and choosing each other. And I choose this. I choose you. I choose all of you." Kellan let out a breath he seemed to have been holding. "Theresa, I cannot offer you the kind of courtship you probably deserve. Dinners in town, flowers, poetry. I am a widowed rancher with 6 children and more work than hours in the day. But I can offer you my heart, my loyalty, and a life filled with love and chaos and purpose. If that is enough, then I would be honored if you would consider marrying me." Theresa laughed, and it came out half-sob. "Are you proposing to me?" "Yes," Kellan said. "I know it is fast, I know people will talk, but I also know what I want, and I want you. Not as a housekeeper or a nanny, but as my wife, as the mother of my children, as my partner in all things." Theresa thought of Thomas, who had discarded her for her perceived failure. Then she thought of Kellan, who saw her worth not in what her body could or could not do, but in who she was as a person. She thought of 6 children who needed love and who had so much love to give in return. She thought of a life filled with purpose and belonging. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." Kellan's face broke into a smile so bright it transformed him. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest, and she felt his heart pounding against hers. Then he was tilting her face up, and he was kissing her, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Kellan rested his forehead against hers. "I need to tell the children. They should hear it from us together." "In the morning," Theresa said. "Let them sleep tonight." But they did not wait until morning. Kit apparently woke up needing water and came downstairs to find them embracing in the firelight. His delighted shriek of "Papa is kissing Miss Theresa" woke up the entire house. Within minutes, All 6 children were thundering down the stairs in their nightclothes, demanding to know what was happening. Kellan and Theresa sat them all down in the main room, and Kellan explained that he had asked Theresa to marry him, and she had said yes. The reactions were immediate and enthusiastic. Catherine burst into tears of joy and threw her arms around Theresa. Kenneth whooped and punched the air. Kyle smiled, a rare, genuine smile that lit up his serious face. Kevin asked if this meant they could call her Mama. Katie climbed into Theresa's lap and announced that she had wanted this all along. Kit just kept saying, "We are getting a mama, we are getting a mama," over and over. "Does this mean you are not leaving?" Catherine asked, wiping her eyes. "This means I am never leaving," Theresa promised. "This is my home now. You are my family now. Can we go tell everyone?" Kenneth asked excitedly. "Can we ride to town tomorrow?" "We will tell people when the time is right," Kellan said. "But for now, this is just for us, our family news." Getting the children back to bed took another hour, as they were all too excited to sleep. But eventually, the house quieted down again, and Kellan walked Theresa to her room. "Are you sure about this?" he asked at her door. "About taking on 6 children and a struggling rancher?" "I have never been more sure of anything," Theresa said. "When Thomas left me, he said I was barren. But you know what? I am not barren. I am fertile in all the ways that matter. I can grow love, I can nurture hope, I can cultivate a family. Those children in there are going to be mine, just as much as if I had given birth to them. Biology does not make a mother. Love does." Kellan kissed her again, slow and deep. "I am the luckiest man alive." "Good," Theresa said with a smile, "because I am the luckiest woman." They were married a week before Christmas in a small ceremony at the ranch. The preacher came out from Platteville, and the Morrison family served as witnesses. The children all dressed in their best clothes, which Theresa had spent the previous week altering and mending. Catherine and Katie wore dresses that had been their mother's, carefully taken in to fit them, and they were so proud they practically glowed. Theresa wore a simple dress of deep blue wool that she had sewn herself, and Catherine braided her hair and wove in ribbons. She had no family to stand with her, but she did not need them. When she walked into the main room where everyone was gathered, and she saw Kellan waiting for her in his good suit, surrounded by 6 beaming children, she knew she had everything she needed right here. The vows were traditional, but when Kellan slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, his voice was thick with emotion. "With this ring I thee wed, and I promise to honor you, cherish you, and stand by you all the days of my life." When it was Theresa's turn, she looked at Kellan and then at the children. "I promise to love you and these children with everything I have, to be your partner, your helpmate, and your friend, to build a life together that honors the past but embraces the future." When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, the children erupted in cheers. Kenneth and Kevin were whooping, Catherine and Katie were crying happy tears, Kyle was grinning, and Kit was jumping up and down. Kellan kissed his new wife while their family celebrated around them. The wedding supper was a feast. Theresa had spent days preparing food with Catherine's help, and the Morrison family brought even more. There was roasted chicken and potatoes, fresh bread, vegetables from the cellar stores, pies and cakes. They ate until they were stuffed. Then the children performed a play they had secretly been rehearsing, which mostly involved Kenneth making everyone laugh and Kit forgetting all his lines. As the evening wound down and the Morrisons headed home, Theresa found herself standing on the porch with Kellan, looking up at the stars. The children were finally in bed, worn out from excitement. "Are you nervous?" Kellan asked quietly. "About tonight?" Theresa knew what he was asking. They had discussed it before the wedding, the physical aspect of their marriage. She had been honest about her fears, about the years of failure with Thomas, about her worry that she was somehow broken. Kellan had taken her hands and said, "If we never have children of our own, that is all right. I already have 6, and if it turns out Thomas was the one with the problem, not you, that would be fine too. Either way, I want you for you, not for any hypothetical children." Now, standing under the stars as husband and wife, Theresa felt those fears fading. "I am not nervous," she said honestly. "I trust you." Their wedding night was tender and sweet and full of whispered promises. Kellan was gentle, patient, attentive to her needs and her fears. When they finally came together, it felt like a homecoming, like two pieces fitting together in a way that was both new and somehow familiar. Afterward, lying in his arms in the big bed upstairs, Theresa felt a peace settle over her that she had never known before. "I love you," Kellan murmured against her hair. "My wife, my Theresa." "I love you too," she whispered back. "My husband, my Kellan." The winter passed in a blur of domestic happiness. Christmas was magical, with a tree cut from the mountains and decorated with strings of popcorn and paper chains the children made. Theresa gave each child something she had sewn or knitted, and Kellan had carved small wooden toys for the younger ones and practical knives for the older boys. Kenneth gave Theresa a picture he had drawn of the whole family, and she cried when she saw herself included, standing next to Kellan with all 6 children around them. January brought deep snows that sometimes kept them housebound for days at a time. But the house was warm, the pantry was full, and they had each other. Theresa taught the children their lessons by lamplight while Kellan repaired tack and tools. They played games in the evenings, read books aloud, and sang songs around the fire. February was brutal, with temperatures that dropped so low the water in the trough froze solid. Kellan and the older boys had to break ice twice a day so the animals could drink. But inside, the house was a haven of warmth and light and love. In March, as the snow began to melt and the first signs of spring appeared, Theresa realized she had missed her monthly courses. Then another month passed, and another. She had learned not to hope, not to let herself believe, but the signs were unmistakable. The tenderness in her breasts, the slight nausea in the mornings, the exhaustion that hit her in the afternoons. She waited until she was sure, until there could be no doubt. Then one evening in early April, after the children were in bed, she told Kellan. He stared at her for a long moment, his eyes wide. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be without a doctor. But Kellan, I am nearly 3 months along now. I am sure." Kellan let out a shout of joy and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around the kitchen. "A baby! We are going to have a baby." "I know you said you did not need more children," Theresa said, laughing and crying at the same time. 6 is already a lot. Are you joking? This is wonderful. The children will be thrilled. They are going to have a little brother or sister. "Or it might not work out," Theresa said, voicing her deepest fear. "I might lose it. I might not be able to carry it to term. Thomas always said I was barren, and maybe he was right." Kellan set her down gently and took her face in his hands. "Thomas was wrong about everything. He was wrong to leave you. He was wrong to blame you. And he was clearly wrong about your ability to have children. You are carrying our baby right now, and I believe with everything in me that you are going to bring this child into the world healthy and strong." Theresa wanted to believe him. And as the weeks passed and her belly began to swell, she started to let herself hope. The children were overjoyed when they were told. Catherine immediately started sewing baby clothes. Kenneth declared he would teach the baby to ride as soon as it could walk. Kyle quietly began building a cradle in the barn. Kevin and Katie argued about whether it would be a boy or a girl. Kit was just excited to not be the baby of the family anymore. Dr. Williams confirmed the pregnancy in May and said everything looked healthy. "Baby should come in October if my calculations are right," he said. "You are doing well, Mrs. Norwood. Keep doing what you are doing, Mrs. Norwood." Theresa loved the sound of that, not Mrs. Hartley, not even Miss Theresa. Mrs. Norwood. A wife, a mother, a woman with a place and a purpose. The summer was busy with ranch work, but Kellan was careful not to let Theresa overdo it. He hired a young man from town to help with the heavier chores, and the children pitched in more than ever. Catherine took over most of the cooking as Theresa's pregnancy progressed. Kyle and Kenneth handled all the outdoor work. Even little Kit tried to help, though mostly he just kept Theresa company and patted her growing belly, talking to his future sibling. In late August, a letter arrived from Denver. It was from a lawyer, informing Theresa that her divorce from Thomas Hartley had been finalized. She stared at the paper, feeling nothing. That life, that marriage, that woman who had believed herself worthless, all of it felt like a distant dream. She was someone else now. Someone stronger, happier, more complete. She showed the letter to Kellan that evening. He read it and then tossed it into the fire. "That part of your life is over. This is your life now." "I know," Theresa said, watching the paper curl and blacken in the flames. "I just wish I could tell Thomas how wrong he was. I wish I could show him this." She gestured to her swollen belly, to the house full of children, to the husband who loved her. "I wish he could see that I was never the problem." "He does not deserve to know," Kellan said firmly. "He gave up the best thing that ever could have happened to him. That is punishment enough." In October, as the aspens turned gold in the mountains and the air grew crisp with the promise of winter, Theresa went into labor. It was long and difficult, lasting nearly 20 hours, but Kellan stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her brow, murmuring encouragement. Dr. Williams was there, and Mrs. Morrison came to help and to keep the children calm downstairs. When the baby finally came, slipping into the world with a furious wail, Dr. Williams announced, "It is a boy, a healthy, strong boy." Theresa sobbed with relief and joy as the doctor placed her son in her arms. He was red and wrinkled and perfect, with a shock of dark hair and his father's brown eyes. Kellan leaned over them, tears streaming down his face, touching the baby's tiny hand with one finger. "Our son," he said in wonder. "Our boy." They named him Thomas, not after Theresa's ex-husband, but because it meant twin, and Theresa said he was proof that she could have a second chance at everything. His middle name was Samuel, after Kellan's father. The children were allowed in to meet their new brother one at a time. Catherine held him with practiced ease, having helped with Kit when he was a baby. Kenneth was nervous but delighted. Kyle was gentle and protective. Kevin declared him small but acceptable. Katie kissed his forehead softly. And Kit looked disappointed that the baby could not play yet, but promised to teach him important things when he got bigger. "We are a family of 9 now," Kellan said that night, sitting on the edge of the bed where Theresa was propped up with baby Thomas nursing contentedly. 9 people under one roof. It is going to be loud and chaotic and wonderful. "It already is," Theresa said with a smile, "and I would not change a single thing." The first year of Thomas's life was full of the normal chaos of a large family. He was a good baby, happy and healthy, reaching all his milestones on time. The older children doted on him, fighting over who got to hold him or make him laugh. Catherine was like a second mother, able to soothe him when he was fussy. Kenneth made silly faces that never failed to get giggles. Kyle carved him little toys. Kevin and Katie sang to him. Kit shared his treasures, rocks and feathers and interesting bugs, much to Theresa's dismay. Kellan was a devoted father to the baby, but he also made sure the older children did not feel neglected. He still spent time with each of them individually, still listened to their problems, still guided them through their struggles. And he was an attentive, loving husband to Theresa, making sure she got enough rest, helping with the night feedings, never making her feel like she was less than because she had 7 children to care for instead of 6. On a warm evening in June, a year and a half after Theresa had first arrived at the ranch, the whole family sat on the porch watching the sunset. Thomas was toddling around on unsteady legs, supervised by Kit. The older children were scattered on the steps and porch railing. Kellan sat in a chair with Theresa on his lap, her head resting on his shoulder. "Papa," Catherine said suddenly, "do you remember when you went to town to find help and you came back with Miss Theresa?" "I do," Kellan said. "That was one of the best days of my life. Do you think Mama sent her?" Catherine asked. "From heaven, because I prayed for someone to help us and then Miss Theresa came." Kellan was quiet for a moment. "I think maybe she did. Your Mama loved you all so much. If she had any say in things from where she is, she would definitely want to make sure you were taken care of." "I think she picked someone who would love us like she did," Kyle said quietly, "because Miss Theresa does." Theresa felt tears prick her eyes. "I do love you, all of you, more than I ever thought it was possible to love." "And we love you," Catherine said firmly. "You are our mama now." "Not our first mama, but our mama still," Kenneth nodded. "Papa always says you can never have too much love, so we get to have 2 mamas who love us. That makes us lucky." Theresa looked at these children who had become hers, at the baby who was hers by blood, at the man who had seen her worth when everyone else saw only failure. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, from abandonment and shame to belonging and joy. "I am the lucky one," she said. "When your papa came to Platteville and offered me a job, I thought he was giving me a way to survive. But he gave me so much more than that. He gave me a family, a home, a purpose. He gave me love when I thought I did not deserve it, and you all gave me a reason to believe in myself again." Kellan kissed the top of her head. "You gave us just as much. You brought life back into this house. You made it a home again. You loved my children like they were your own from the very first day, and you gave me hope that I could love again, that my heart was not buried with Sarah." "Do you think Mama minds?" Katie asked in a small voice. "That Papa loves Miss Theresa now." Kellan pulled Katie onto his knee. "Your Mama loved me enough to want me to be happy, even after she was gone. She told me so right before she died. She said I should find someone who would love you all and take care of you. I think when she is looking down on us now, she is glad I found Theresa. I think she is grateful that you have someone who loves you so much." "And I am grateful to your Mama," Theresa added. "Because she raised you to be kind, loving, generous children. She gave you a foundation of love that made it easy for you to accept me. I could never replace her, and I would never try. But I hope I can honor her memory by loving you the way she would have wanted you to be loved." Thomas chose that moment to trip and fall, letting out a wail. Immediately, 3 children jumped up to comfort him, arguing over who got to pick him up first. Kellan laughed and went to sort out the dispute, leaving Theresa on the porch with the view of the prairie stretching out before her, painted in shades of gold and purple by the setting sun. A year ago, she had been a woman who thought her life was over. Now she was a mother of 7, a wife to a good man, a woman with a place in the world. She had learned that family was not about blood or biology. It was about showing up every day and choosing to love, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. She had learned that she was not barren, had never been barren. She had just needed the right soil to grow in, the right people to nurture her, the right love to help her bloom. As Kellan came back to her side, Thomas now on his hip and the other children trailing behind, Theresa smiled. This was her family. This was her home. This was the life she was meant to live, and it was more than she had ever dared to dream. The years that followed were full of the normal rhythms of ranch life. Winters were hard, summers were hot, and there was always work to be done. But through it all, the Norwood family thrived. Kyle grew into a young man who was every bit his father's equal in ranching skills, taking on more and more responsibility. Kenneth's humor and energy never dimmed, even as he shot up taller than Kellan and developed a swagger that made Theresa laugh. Catherine blossomed into a beautiful young woman with her mother's gentle nature and Theresa's practical skills. Kevin and Katie remained inseparable, partners in crime and best friends. Kit grew out of being the baby of the family with good grace, becoming Thomas's devoted protector and playmate. And Thomas himself was a happy, boisterous boy who had never known anything but love and belonging. 2 years after Thomas was born, Theresa gave birth to twin daughters, Margaret and Mary, whose arrival had caused both joy and exhausted laughter. 9 children, Kellan had said, looking slightly dazed as he held both babies. "We have 9 children." "We do," Theresa had agreed, smiling up at him from the bed. "Are you sorry?" "Not even a little bit," he had said, leaning down to kiss her. "Our family is perfect," and it was. Perfectly imperfect, perfectly chaotic, perfectly full of love, on a crisp autumn day in 1889, 7 years after Theresa had first arrived at the ranch, the family gathered for a special occasion. Kyle, now 20, was getting married to a sweet girl from Platteville named Emma. The wedding was at the ranch, just like Kellan and Theresa's had been, and the whole community came to celebrate. As Theresa stood watching her oldest son make his vows, Kellan's arm around her waist and their younger children gathered around them, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. These children who had needed a mother had given her purpose. This man who had needed a partner had given her love. This ranch that had needed a woman's touch had given her a home. "What are you thinking?" Kellan murmured in her ear. "I am thinking about the day you drove into Platteville with 6 children in the back of a wagon and offered me a job," Theresa said. "I am thinking about how that was the day my life really began." "You saved us," Kellan said. "All of us. We were drowning and you threw us a lifeline." "No," Theresa corrected gently. "We saved each other. I was drowning too and you threw me a lifeline. You told me you already had 6 children who needed a mother and I thought you were just offering me work. But you were offering me everything I had ever wanted. A family, a purpose, love." "Good," Kellan said, pulling her closer, "because I plan to keep offering it to you every day for the rest of our lives." Thomas, now 6 years old, tugged on Theresa's skirt. "Mama, when do we get cake?" Theresa laughed and ruffled his hair. "Soon, my darling, after the ceremony." "But I am hungry now," he complained. "Then I suppose you had better practice patience," Theresa said, but she slipped him a biscuit from her pocket anyway. Kellan shook his head. "You spoil him." "I spoil all of them," Theresa said unapologetically. "That is what mothers do." As the sun set over the Colorado prairie, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, the Norwood family celebrated together. There was music and dancing, laughter and joy, food and fellowship. The children ran wild, playing tag in the gathering dusk. The adults talked and reminisced and made plans for the future. And in the middle of it all, Kellan and Theresa stood together, watching the family they had built. A family that had started with 2 broken people and 6 grieving children, but had grown into something beautiful and strong and unshakable. "I love you," Kellan said, not for the first time and certainly not for the last. "I love you too," Theresa replied, the words as true now as they had been the first time she had said them. "Thank you for seeing me when everyone else looked away. Thank you for believing I was enough when I did not believe it myself. Thank you for giving me this life." "Thank you for choosing us," Kellan said. "Thank you for loving my children like they were yours. Thank you for making this house a home again. Thank you for being exactly who we needed." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Theresa leaned her head on Kellan's shoulder and watched their children laugh and play. She thought about the woman she had been 7 years ago, broken and lost and convinced she had nothing to offer. And she thought about the woman she was now, a mother and wife in the very heart of a large, loud, loving family. Her first husband had left her, calling her barren and worthless. But her second husband had found her, and he had said the words that changed everything. "Good. I already have 6 kids who need a mother." And in becoming their mother, in choosing them and being chosen by them, Theresa had found herself. She had discovered that the measure of a woman was not in her ability to bear children, but in her capacity to love. And her capacity for love, it turned out, was infinite. She was not barren. She was abundant. She was overflowing. She was exactly enough, and she was home.